action process is a reactive process. So we employ this process after a problem has occurred, after we've identified a non-conformance. The corrective action process is geared towards returning your process to a state where it's no longer creating non-conformances. So it's geared towards preventing recurrence of issues or non-conformances, problems that have previously arisen. Non-conformance refers to a failure to meet applicable requirements. And it can be applied to services, quality management system, or products manufactured within the organization. Non-conformances can be identified from various sources. Here we're saying that we can have a non-conformance being identified during an audit, an internal audit, or during an external audit. These can arise from product inspections, from analyses of data. You know, pretty much anyone within your organization or even your customers should be able to identify when things aren't going the way they should and raise a red flag so that these issues can be addressed. So pretty much a wide array of sources abound within and even external without your organization to identify non-conformances. In our presentation, we'll take a 7-step approach. So we'll look at this thing through 7 steps and take a breakdown so we can kind of bring about a greater granulation and drive towards the process being more successful. The first step we'll look at is defining the problem and the scope of the problem. Then we'll move on to look at correcting the issue and putting containment actions in place. We'll then go on to analyzing the process that you have in place and then looking to see why the issue occurred, why we had that non-conformance, identify the root cause or the source of that problem. Next is to plan the corrective action, implement your corrective action. Then we move on to verifying the effectiveness, and the process usually at that point is no longer, may not be linear anymore. We may have to take different actions depending on the outcome of that step. And then we move on to standardizing the issue. Pretty much this depiction captures, or it can be applied to most corrective action processes. We look at correcting and containing the issue, the second step. There are a few times when we may not need to do a correction where we apply to maybe a KPI that's not being met. In those cases, there might not be a way to correct it. We need to do a deep dive into the processes that contribute to that KPI, and we may skip that process. But otherwise, most issues that I've come across, we can use this 7-step process to drive for some form of elimination of the cause and returning that process to operating in the manner it was intended. So the first step identified here is defining the problem and the scope. So the question we ask, what was the requirement? What is it that we're trying to achieve? And this requirement can come from a wide array of sources. It can be a customer requirement, product specification, quality management system requirement. So that needs to be clearly understood. Then we move on to seeing what was the observed condition by whoever that observer was, who identified that nonconformance. What was the condition that they observed? The gap between these two pretty much will define the problem. The gap between where we want to be and where we are becomes the nonconformance. That becomes the problem that we need to address. We also want to look at the extent of this nonconformance. You know, who did what, or what happened, who was involved in nonconformance, when did this occur, where did it occur, you know, what's the scope? Is it something local to just the machine shop, or is it within an entire department? Is it something that's affecting the entire company? Is it something that we may not be able to say pass our factory acceptance test, so we can't ship products to our customers? So the scope of this needs to be clearly defined, as this sets the pace for all the additional steps that will come later on, and how we will plan the actions that we will take to bring our system or our process back to a healthy state. We also need to look at, it's important that we view the risks associated with nonconformance. So here we're looking at the implications of this nonconformance. Who is affected? How will they be affected? What are the risks? Are we looking at safety-related issues? Safety to life type issues? Are we looking at product safety issues? So all of this needs to be addressed, as it will determine what type of approach we take later on to drive the actions that we need to fix this issue. And all of this encapsulates the definition of the problem and the scope of that problem. I'll use terms such as problem and nonconformance interchangeably. The second step is to correct the nonconformance. In correcting the nonconformance, what we want to do is to ensure that the condition of nonconformity is eliminated. So what comes to mind, if you're looking at a procedure that's not meeting a particular requirement, we could update that procedure as a correction. So if that procedure should establish certain steps or determine when do we issue a corrective action, or when do we exercise a corrective action, then if it's missing from that procedure, then we need to ensure that we put that requirement in the procedure, and that's our correction. If it's a product that's oversized, we may be able to cut it to reduce it to size. Product being undersized, we may need to scrap it. You know, if it's a product that's been shipped, we may need to do a recall. Comes in, we find some measure of, or make a determination on how we will dispose such product. Be it that we can scrap it, we can repair it, all in line with the requirements of our company and our organization and other contractual agreements that we are obligated to. So we're saying that product service related nonconformances are typically addressed through your process for controlling nonconforming products and nonconforming services. In this time, at this point, we also want to take consideration of industry specific requirements. So if our organization is obligated to meet, let's say, the Food and Drug Administration requirements, there may be specific requirements that we may have to execute for corrections. Same for oil and gas. If you're obligated to meeting, say, the API monogram program requirements, we may have specific requirements that you may have to execute in handling non-conforming product. The medical industry may have their own. So we want to take some time to note these issues at this point. We also we want to ensure that the identified risks are considered and addressed as well. So in doing your own correction process, we want to make sure that all risks are taken into consideration. If you're issuing a product that could fail, causing environmental hazards or damage to the environment or failure to human life, you want to lock that down and take urgent action so as to mitigate such loss. You know, one of the things that I think could be mentioned at this point as well, in designing your quality management system, it's important that you consider these corrections and the steps to ensure that you're able to execute on these actions. One thing that comes to mind in calibration, in regards to control of your calibrated equipment, we lose traceability with what products are measured using specific gauges. The gauges go out and we realize that the gauge was out of the acceptance criteria. And we need to make a call on how this may affect product that was shipped to our customers, or product that may have been accepted as being intolerance within the tolerance, within the limits. But if you're not able to trace this item or this gauge back to the products, you lose the ability to determine the impact. So having a searchable means of tracking or tying your gauges to products that you use them to measure, it's a good practice. And you want to design your quality management system in a way that it can allow you to execute on these type of actions. So continue correcting and containing the issue. Your containment actions are the steps that we would take to be somewhat of a short-term measure. You put these in place to allow for time to develop more long-term permanent solution. One action that we could probably use is 100% inspection. So if you realize your machining process is issuing or producing parts that are not meeting the acceptance criteria, you may want to tighten your inspection. So you do more sampling and give yourself the opportunity to capture or to catch things that may not be conforming. So you reduce the probability of escapes to your customers as one containment measure. You may also want to activate any applicable contingency plans. You may have a backup shop, a backup machine shop that may be able to kick in and help you to do the production while you get your system into a state of conformance, under control. Next step we look at here is to analyze the process. So we believe the process creates the nonconformance. If it's a product, if it's a procedure, it has to have a source where it was created. We want to take some time to look at the process that made that product, to identify what controls we have in place, understand how it was designed to be run, and what might have failed. And here we are conducting our actual root cause analysis. So we're looking to see what might have failed in the process. And here we can drill down, use any of the well-known methods, the Ishikawa diagram, your cause-effect diagram, your 5Y, 5M&E, which is the same as the cause and effect in Ishikawa, or one good one of Taproot, which is very good at identifying both causal effects. So you're looking here at probable causes and root causes. Then we drill down to identify why the nonconformance occurred. Ensure that underlying cause is identified versus a perceived cause. So from a manufacturing standpoint, you have an escape from your manufacturing process. Do we determine that the inspector who didn't catch it was the reason it escaped, or do we drill down to see where was the non-conforming product made in our company? You know, how far, what's the scope? Was it made outside? Did we bring it in from a supplier? And if that's the case, we may need to issue a supplier corrective action to reach out to that supplier to see if they can fix that problem. We want to get to the source, the root of that problem. Next, we look at planning the corrective action. So we create solutions for the identified root cause. You know, if it's a machine that's out of control, we look to see how we can make repairs to it to ensure that we reduce the variation so it can actually meet the process capability. If multiple solutions are identified, the most suitable is selected. You want to look at this from a feasibility standpoint, which is going to actually have the most impact on the problem that we are trying to solve. And we move on to determine the resources needed. What will be needed to actually implement this corrective action? And might I say here that the corrective action, it is in itself are the controls that we implement to address the root cause. And this is to ensure or to reduce the probability of a likelihood of recurrence. Step 5, we implement the corrective action. In implementing the corrective action, we want to clearly decide who will handle the implementation activities. So who will do what? If it's a procedure to be rewritten, who will rewrite it? You know, who will roll out that procedure to ensure that the people affected are trained on that procedure, are aware of the procedure, understand how it is to be applied within the organization. How will it be done? What are the timelines for implementation? So when will we actually do the implementation? When will we do what? And where will the solution be implemented? All of these are key to the actual implementation. It has to be planned, so we are acting in a purposeful way, and we know that these are the outcomes that we are actually trying to achieve in the implementation process. We want to follow these all the way through to completion to ensure that the corrective action can be effectively put in place. The next step, which is very key to all of what we've said, is verifying the effectiveness. So having done all of this work, the question is, did it work? Did we achieve what we set out to achieve? Is our process no longer creating non-conformances? So here we have to decide what activities will be assessed to determine effectiveness of the non-conformance. What are the measures? What metrics are we going to put in place to determine effectiveness? When, the timelines, and what method will these assessments will be made? How will these assessments be made? Sorry. Then we want to look to see, have any unforeseen problems developed because of the changes? Here, we make changes oftentimes to our process, and we could have some collateral damage or another process being thrown out of control because of the change. So we are looking at some management of change issues here to ensure that we are not affecting or creating other adverse problems by trying to fix one problem. If the corrective action is deemed ineffective, we may want to revisit some of the previous steps. So did we miss something in the planning? Did we miss something in the root cause analysis? Did we miss the actual root cause? And how did we do the implementation? Was it implemented the way it should have? because at this stage we want to know that our process is working. The verification step is key to all of what we just did. If the results of this prove that we didn't do anything, that we want to build on it, go back and see how we can optimize the overall process or the steps to make changes so that we can get to a state of effectiveness. If the corrective action is considered ineffective, we drill down and do all of these measures. If it's effective, on the other hand, we move on to step 7. So we don't proceed from step 6 to step 7 until we have proven effectiveness of this process. So of the effectiveness of the implemented corrective action, sorry. And then step 7, we standardize the corrective action, the solution that we've put in place. We do some standardizing of this and we do plans for future activities. So it says upon determination that the changes are effective, we document the change to ensure positive controls of the process variables. We determine how the body of work will be used to achieve future levels of performance. So how can we use this to drive the improvement of our organization? And then we transfer the appropriate activities within the organizations, lessons learned, the technical know-how in problem solving, communications, and group dynamic. All of this, we are now learning more things about our company or the culture of the organization. What root cause analysis method worked? How did we communicate this? How did we roll it out? Who were the champions of the process? How did we get buy-in? All of this, we want to use this body of knowledge to drive future improvements within the company. And on our last slide, we look at how we actually apply all of these steps to the PDCA improvement concept. So from a planning standpoint, we are looking to see all the plans that we put in place. The implementation would follow as the doing actions. We go back and we do the check, which is the verification section. And the action here would be to standardize. So we plan, we do the action, we check to see if it worked, we take action to standardize it, and then this information rolls back over into our next planning section, and the cycle continues to drive continuous improvement in our organization. Thanks. So that slide brought us to the end of my section of the presentation. We will now, I will now pass on to Michael so he can do his section, and then we will go into our discussion section.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Callum. Just stop sharing. Stop sharing.
I'm trying to see.
It's going to be on the bottom of your screen.
Yeah, see where it says share on the bottom.
Yeah, I'm not seeing that. Let me see here.
It should be on the very bottom of the screen next to the big red X. It'll say share.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Sorry about that delay.
All right. Eduardo, can I go?
Yes, go ahead, please.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me, Eduardo? Everything good?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Michael Pryor. I'm a member of 1405, have been for a couple of weeks. And tonight I'm going to be discussing root cause analysis with practical experiences. When Eduardo, Sheldon, and I got together to talk about this presentation for you guys tonight, we wanted to, just kind of cover generally the topic of corrective action and generally maybe a little bit deeper on root cause analysis, but leave the floor open because I want to discuss practical experiences. I've got a couple I'll talk about, and I'd like people to either raise their hand or we can open a discussion when we're all done about root causes, because as auditors and as quality managers and as people involved in quality, a lot of people, including myself, you get used to doing something kind of one way. This is the way I do root cause, or this is the way I describe a nonconformance and how I do a disposition action. Other people with other organizations have other ways. And that's what a lot of this is to share, getting back to the basics, share what you have. Because there are 2 or 3 real popular tools for root cause analysis that a lot of people, if everybody uses. There's other people that have different things depending on the fields you're in, which I'll talk about in a second. But I just want to touch base on what root cause, basically definition, go through it, and then open the floor up when I'm done with what Sheldon presented with corrective actions, which included part of what I'm talking about, so that we can share practical experiences and trade information with each other. I noticed some of the questions when Sheldon was talking, and I thought they were very good. And hopefully that will continue. So I'll begin. Multiple definitions and awkward uses. Root cause analysis is a method of problem solving used for identifying the root causes of faults and problems. Okay, I can take you to 5 other locations, different ASQs. I can go to ISO in Switzerland, ISO in Great Britain, which I did through 2 registrars, and I can get 4 different other definitions of it. But this is one that's probably accepted a long way because 3 registrars that I know in Great Britain use this as their definition of root cause. Multiple definitions have been attached to the phrase based upon the medium or the field of endeavor. What I mean by that is what's next is the process is used in many professional settings in areas such as engineering, manufacturing, medicine, etc. Several of these have their own definition for a root cause and how to approach it. And that's something as a quality practitioner, whether you're in quality with an organization or you're a quality manager or a quality assurance specialist or an auditor, you're going to see these types of things pop up where you're not quite sure if you go across an area you're not comfortable with or used to on how they're defining what a root cause might be. We all think we know in our minds what they are, but a lot of times practical experience shows you that people you think should know what's going on make mistakes, and other people that you don't think have a grasp on it actually have a better grasp than you do. I've had that happen to me as an auditor. Conducting root cause analysis.
Sorry to interrupt, Michael. You are not sharing. Do you want me to share your presentation or you want to share?
I thought it was sharing. You don't see my screen? You see my screen?
No.
Okay, well, hold on. Let me share again. Let's see here. Hold on. Now do you see it?
Yes, it's there now. It's loading.
Is there it?
Yes,
it is.
I can see it.
All right, this is what I was talking about earlier, right here. Many different settings. Conducting root cause. As Sheldon has previously discussed, we're going to kind of be covering several of the areas. I'm going to throw some of my opinions out toward this. But the problem being defined and assessed. This is where a lot of the errors are made. I'm talking now as a consultant and an auditor, and I've got 10 years doing this stuff, and I've only seen probably scratched the tip of the iceberg. But what I find out when I'm doing an audit, it doesn't matter what, because I audit across 11 standards. And this is where a lot of times errors are made, is the initial assessment. Because what happens is people jump to a conclusion, and we'll get to that here in another slide. But you've got to be very careful upon the definition of the problem. I mean, don't take the first observable thing that you understand as an issue and attach it to being the root cause. And that happens a lot. And then they wonder why issues continue to happen down the road because they didn't do a proper root cause analysis. Collection of data and analyzation should lead to a problem identification if it's done in a systemic way. That's a systematic way, excuse me, bad word. And this is very important, that you have a process when you look at an organization, this process should be at least in a procedural form, if not specifically a work instruction to quality people to try and define the situation. Now, I talked about earlier how things can cross lines. Engineering individuals have a different way of looking at the world, which we all know and can appreciate. At the same time, they may not pass that information directly to you as an auditor or as a consultant, so you have to muddle your way through and dealing with different professionals within organizations. But if you're able to collect enough data on an issue that you have defined and assessed as a possible risk, and you're analyzing that data, it should lead you to a problem identification. Determine the causes by prioritizing it. That's what root cause is, because generally, very few things in life have a single root cause that pop out and it's laying on the floor in front of you. Identifying solutions and implementing necessary changes is vital, because the issue with when you're doing a corrective action and you're looking for a root cause, remember, risk is always raising its nice little head at you. And depending on the issue at hand, speed and brevity can help you out. You need to get into the problem as quickly as possible, but then analyze it with time as you find it. And identifying and implementing necessary changes is all based upon what comes before it, from the problem definition being defined and all the analyzation of data. But most importantly, once you take those actions, the evaluation of effectiveness, there's 4 or 5 sections in ISO 2015 for instance, it talks specifically about effectiveness evaluations. Okay, and that could be training records, that could be root cause analysis and the like. There's several areas where you've got to effectively evaluate what happened and making sure that it worked, because I always tell people, whether I'm teaching a class of auditing or I'm at a class like this or I'm actually at a client site, 9 times out of 10, if you have a recurring issue that you have to reopen or go back on on a corrective action, the root cause analysis was done improperly or wasn't finished. Proper steps weren't taken. And that's what caused the miss and allowed it to reoccur. Tools of the trade and errors. The 5 whys. I'm assuming most of the people in this class tonight are very familiar, or at least have dealt with or heard of the 5 whys. And I get this question a lot from people. Can there be more than 5 whys? Can you have 6? Can you have 7? Can you have 8? Or can you have multiple tables? The answer is yes, yes, and yes. I have one client that they always take a 5 why and they have a rule of +3. And it's just to double check the 5 before them to make sure they're on the right track. Can you have less than 5 whys? Absolutely. Kind of rare, but you can pop 1 or 2 and then all of a sudden you can determine what the cause was. More rare than common, I'm afraid, in my experience. Another thing is that a lot of people make mistakes on, and I'm hoping that the class tonight will talk about this and experiences they have about contributing causes and how a contributing cause can really throw off a root cause investigation. Because a lot of times that contributing cause is like a match when it's lit. It's very bright, it burns fast, and gets everybody's attention. But in 15, 20 seconds, it burns down to nothing. And a lot of times you see root causes that I see as an auditor where they went in there and they said, this happened again. And I look and I said, well, this is what was contrary. Let's look at this again. And it takes sometimes a month to figure it out. But what happens is they get caught off guard with a contributing cause. And we can talk about examples when I'm through. I've got a couple that are pretty much on point about a contributing cause that was looked at as the primary cause and it turned out not to be. Now, most common errors. The first observation fits, so go with it. And that happens a lot. A lot of times you're dealing with 3 different types of organizational individuals that have this. You're looking at an organization that is not up to speed on quality and quality issues and the use of root cause analysis to begin with. You're looking at organizations that are under the gun on time and speed, and they're trying to get stuff corrected as fast as they can. And then you're looking at third organizations that do it right by procedure. But if they do it wrong during that procedure, they can still make the same errors. But most people that do this and take the time eventually find a root cause. But I just saw a question pop up. Are all root causes actionable? It depends, because you can have more than one root cause for an incident or an issue. And if one root cause is determined and corrected, it can actually correct a separate root cause, such as a software glitch or software item, something written wrong. But if you're correcting the process and the process is corrected, then you go back and fix the other one. That has happened too. Most common errors: contributing cause misidentified as root failure in order to identify more than one root cause. They're looking to come up with multiple root causes for issues that generally only have one. Another tool of the trade that's very popular is the Fishbone. And I've had this question asked of me too. It's like, can I do it myself? Well, if you're brilliant, you might give it a shot. But Fishbone is primarily designed as a group setting tool. And the next question I've asked, why is a group needed? Because the purpose of a Fishbone is you want to get people, if you've got a serious issue on a process that you're trying to figure out, and you've also got risk associated with that issue that keeps popping up. To have more than one person from various departments is a good thing. You can have engineering, you can have operations, you can have quality, heck, you can have purchasing, you have sales, whatever you think you need. You can have one department with multiple players because different opinions generate different results. Okay? The benefits of that group is, I don't like this term because it was real popular in the 90s, but it is what it is. Groupthink. If done properly, groupthink can really help you because everybody gets equal footing to propose solutions or identify the problem, analyze the data associated with the problem, and then propose a solution. And if you get a group agreement to attack it that way, it makes it a lot easier to assign responsibility because people's going to understand what's going on from the get-go. Very effective tool. Okay, and the Fishbone is not limited to these 6 little bones. You can have splinter bones coming off of that into the 20s and 30s. I've seen some diagrams that'll just give you a headache. Now, if you've got 300 people working on the problem, you can have a Fishbone like that. And that's a whalebone. Companies I deal with, you got a little Fishbone, probably a trout, and everybody's happy with it. Okay, who is the best choice to lead a root cause analysis? It depends on your company and it depends on your organization. Okay, lots of companies have stars in them, people that really understand what's going on, have a knack, have a niche, and also are open to suggestion. They will go to people and ask their opinion to help them. That's wonderful. A lot of companies, your smaller organizations, I'm saying smaller, 75 or less people, generally it's related to the quality department and any quality manager thereof. And hopefully that person has the skill set, and if needs help, requests help. A production manager is also, a lot of companies, a production manager is a real good source for root cause because they're dealing with the process at the process level. From the travelers or your work orders going through there, they know the people, the technicians, they know how the system is set up, the machinery, the maintenance on that machinery is always important if you have an issue with a process step. Because I've always told people, look at your process and look at the tools you're implementing it with. Start with the people, start with the people's tools, start with their machinery, and move yourself backwards and forwards until you can align your thoughts down toward whatever a root cause might be. Engineering depends on the organization. Engineering heavy laden organizations, that's a very good point to help them with root cause because they understand process steps, their engineering steps, and they can aid like a quality department in many, many fields. And I've gotten a lot of great information and taught me a lot by dealing with engineering and the way they set up their systems and their process, especially people that deal in CAD a lot, because they're very detail oriented and they can help with root cause analysis if they're given the opportunity, if possible. Bad experience. An organization has never heard of root cause analysis. And that's happens. They just, they've never associated, their CAPA is a two process thing and they write it up and say, we're done. They don't do effectiveness evaluations, but they certainly not have. This is very rare, but it's out there. And I've run across it in a couple of different places in Houston and a couple of places outside the state. Now, this is where you get smaller organizations, where an organization or a quality manager or a small quality department has never heard of, nor has they ever utilized a 5Y or Fishbone or any other type of tool. And they can't define in their own words why problems keep happening and happening and happening. And when you try to explain to them, you blew the root cause, or you didn't conduct the root cause, or you ignored evidence because you failed to collect the data and analyze it to properly define the issue, you're going to keep repeating stuff because you're looking observationally. This is what looks like what's wrong. Let's fix that. We should be fine. And a lot of times they're missing the boat. Conclusion. I'd like to, like I said, Sheldon and Eduardo and I talked about this being a true remote session where people ask questions. We can get questions back and forth. I certainly don't have all the answers. Okay. I know the standard pretty well. I got some audit experience under my belt. I've written some articles, but I'm not an answer man. Sheldon, lots of experience. His API credentials are out the wazoo. He doesn't have all the answers. And Eduardo,
by no means,
has all the answers, but he never shares them with anybody. But I'd like to thank you for having me talk tonight. I hope I was able to give some information some of y'all can, or produce questions in your mind that y'all can take away from this. And I'm going to quit sharing my screen and turn it back over to Eduardo at this time. Thank you. Did I quit?
Look to the top of your screen.
Wow, where am I at here?
No, we can still hear you.
Oh yeah, I see it.
Yeah.
Okay, stop sharing. Got it.
Yes.
There you go.
If you're talking, we can hear you.
Yeah, we're not hearing you, Eduardo.
Oh, sorry. We have Nick, a question from for Sheldon. It comes from Nick Kosher. I don't know if Nick wants to do the question directly. Nick?
May I ask a question or make a comment to Mr. John Littlejohn and also Mike? You mentioned about, like, the better way of sampling is more sampling. I kind of disagree with you. I think the sampling method should be examined first before you do more sampling, because you can do more sampling if your sampling methodology is not done properly. You're going to go back to the same, bad result.
Right. So, yes, Alexandra. So my point there was to move to a more tightened sampling. So the method, I agree, needs to be accurate and meet the need of your organization. However, if you're having failures, if your system is not effective, your manufacturing process is not effective, then moving more to 100% sampling may increase the chances of you identifying non-conformances. It's not a guarantee, because even within the sampling and inspection, you could still have false positives. But it's one of the containment measures that may help you to prevent escapes.
Yeah, and my second comment was to Mike. You talk about the concept of groupthink back in the 90s. Groupthink has never been a good thing, in any organization. Groupthink is a consensus that kills creativity. One of the main reasons that the most organizations I have worked for are using Fishbone, because they encourage people to do a brainstorming, so the groupthink is going to be actually destroyed. Because groupthink, you put a bunch of engineers, I'm one of them actually, put them in a group that already have some sort of notion what the problem is, then they're going to push the agenda and they come up with the exact same solution they come up with. And sometimes the root cause analysis comes from those guys who are the rookies and the new kids on the block. They can see better things better than us. So that's kind of my comments.
You're muted, Mike.
Yeah, I used the wrong term, and I tried to catch myself saying I hated that term. I just couldn't think of anything off the top of my head that, you know, a setting. But my whole point is like your point, is to bring in people that don't have, you know, their built-in biases. That they do, they're going to have to try and defend it against 5, 6, 7 other people. And like if you get a room full of engineers, like you said, that have the same training, the same way of doing business in an organization, you're going to get the same result probably dang near every time. Or you're going to have 1 or 2 individuals work over everybody else. So groupthink was a bad word or term I used. I shouldn't have said that. What I'm trying to say is that you want more of a village setting where you have multiple people from different expertises that can come in and talk about a situation to try and develop a solution rather than justify a bias. That's what I meant. And your point's well taken because you're absolutely right. And I hate that word too because it got so overused and it produces exactly what they want to produce every time or off the top of their head.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Get down. Oh, sorry.
You're muted,
Yeah.
Michael. I mean, Eduardo.
Well, sorry. Any other comments? Any other discussion points that I saw? Who else? Forrest, right? Sharing something about external to analyze corrective action request report. Good. So, Forrest, you want to share something?
Yeah, well,
just
sharing. Yeah, just saying the need to thoroughly investigate. You know, don't take it's a corrective action request. Don't take it instantly as gospel that there's a systemic failure in your processes. Like, actually, look, it could just be a one-of occurrence, and you really need to check and make sure it's is this a trending occurrence or just a simple one-of.
Who's that directed to? Sheldon or me?
Oh no, it was just sharing, right? So if you
Yeah,
want
just a
to
comment.
elaborate a little more on that.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Well, I saw a comment somebody made that on root cause analysis, you know, it's a good place to start with contributing factors in order to whittle down to find a root cause. If you've got the proper data where you can identify a contributing factor, 1 or more, and then backtrack that, follow the trail back, that is very good if you have that type of data available. Many instances, you're starting with an event and you're trying to recreate the steps. It's like ID and trace from the source, from the customer back to the source. You're almost having to work backwards at certain times in order to capture that. But that's a good point. If you have data that you can identify as contributing and look at where those sources of the contributing data, contributing factors began, that's a good place to start.
Yeah, to that point, Michael, I've used a system called Taproot. And
So I didn't hear what?
I've used a system called Taproot as an investigative tool for root cause analysis.
Okay, you broke up. I didn't hear that.
Oh, can you hear me better now?
Yeah, that's better.
Oh, yes. So I was saying that I've used a tool called Taproot to conduct root cause investigations. And,
okay. Why don't you share with everybody that?
Yes, it was a very valuable tool in that it tracks the entire sequence of events and identify each opportunity that a failure could have been caught. Those are, as you said, contributing factors, or we refer to them then as causal factors. And those are addressed to help to shore up your system, but we still drill down to see where did that non-conformance, where was it created? So we can actually stop the creation of it while we shore up the rest of our system to ensure that we can have some redundancies built into the overall system.
Well, I think that's very good. I mean, that's a very valid point. And I've been in companies where the issues are contained within a section of a manufacturing floor. And I've also done audits at large chemical plants where something can occur, 2 miles away, and you've got to physically walk it and try to figure out what's going on. So it's interesting points. But any types of tools that if we could, if you want to send emails into Eduardo and we can share that, some of your points are really valid. The more we can share with each other, the better.
Yeah, I'm gonna add something, Mike, if you don't mind, based on my own experience. The question is that when would be appropriate to use 5 whys for root cause analysis versus the Fishbone? You beautifully mentioned that. My experience is that I'm going to start from Fishbone because I want to have an inclusive kind of environment that everybody contribute, from engineers to sales and marketing to maintenance and production. And then there's going to be an algorithm. Two situations happens. Whether you have got a reliable and consistent data. So you do a Pareto diagram, you find those 20%ers cause 80% of your headache. That would be one solution. In the absence of reliable data or consistent data, you have got 2 choices. One is 5 whys. You're going to put together all people in the trenches, the pool of experts who've been there, done that. There is no data they can contribute to root cause analysis. Or the second one, which has heavily kind of encouraged, is FMEA, failure mode and end analysis. You can find the frequency, severity, and occurrence. There is no data. The people in the trenches can, based on the historical information, they can come up with some idea. So we are not going to waste your time chasing our tails. We're going to focus on vital few causing the major headaches for your operation.
You're muted, Mike. Sorry.
Yeah.
Very good point. It all depends a lot of times in reality, depending on the size of your business. Okay. And in smaller organizations, you have 1, maybe 2 people in quality. And those people are basically, wherever they learn this, they start with the 5 whys because they're by themselves. And sometimes it takes, bringing the mountain of Muhammad to get a meeting scheduled with 2 or 3 people. From what you're describing in your type of organization, that is a phenomenal way of doing that. Because basically what you're doing, the FMEA, what you described is the description of determining and assessing risk. Okay, and once that risk is assigned, that can lead you down the trail you need to go. And that's a very good tool. There's softwares that exist for that. There's, like you said, there's algorithms that exist for that. A lot of your smaller organizations, you got 1 guy or maybe 2 that are trying to solve this in a company of 65 people. And they start with the 5 whys, and some of them never even get to utilize a Fishbone. But you probably presented the most effective way of doing this if you have the resources and manpower. I noticed somebody made a comment earlier. It says it all depends on how many people you have to help you. And a lot of these companies, people are small or they just don't have the help. But your comment, Alexander, was very well taken by me, because if you have resources, you dang well should use them. And what you described is just like you were talking earlier about sampling, for instance. Those were all great examples when you have the resources and manpower to undertake that. A lot of your smaller organizations that I audit, for instance, and I consult with, just don't have that. And they start with the 5 whys, but I've been trying to get them to say, look, get 2 or 3 other people from your company. You don't have to formalize it, but do a Fishbone in order to try and get some opinions so you can understand what's going on. Your point was very well accepted by me.
Yeah, same here. And I would also add that it takes into consideration the scope of the problem, how widespread it is throughout the organization. That's why it's important to have all of these definitions and collect as much data as possible going in before we actually launch into the root cause analysis and identification of the actual cause.
Okay, good deal. I see some comments from Rebecca. I don't know if somebody wants to share now on video or just on the chat. Don't be shy. No? You know, I want to share. You can see that. You can see my screen. Sorry.
Yes.
It was about you know, I don't know what I cannot see. It's about some verifications
Yes, we can see.
that I do. I did this for a corrective action, and this is the criteria that now we select one of these types for the verification of effectiveness, review the effectiveness of a corrective action, right? Can be auditing, spot check, sampling, monitoring, trend analysis, or periodic product review. So it's some methods that, you know, we create this form now for how to review the effectiveness of corrective actions. When it's mostly applied for products, but it can apply to other corrective actions. Just sharing. Because I heard some people talking about sampling, and so just some sharing. What about
I kind of had a question. Hello, everyone. Thank you to the guest speakers and ASQ for putting on this event tonight. I deal with suppliers and sub-tier suppliers, and typically I feel like eventually I'm going to run into where a car is going to come across my desk, and I'm going to be more than have a biased opinion that suspicions are of the customer's process of handling, let's say, the hardware. So in this scenario that I'm trying to paint a picture for you guys is that hardware was delivered to the customer. Let's say something simple we can all wrap our heads around, like condensation or water is on the hardware causing damage, and they're wanting to point the fingers at the supplier, me. So, and then me wanting to point the finger right back at them saying, no, it was your process. You know, we delivered it, certified it as compliant upon receiving, and perhaps something in their process caused the nonconformance. So I hope I illustrated my kind of example there. Okay. But basically what I'm getting at is when you're doing a root cause analysis and you can't determine your process at fault after going through all these, you know, different tools or things of that, when from anyone on this call, your experience, do you look at outside external kind of cause and effects, or external, you know, when do you do an external kind of root cause analysis of their processes?
Well, typically, okay, I'm on. Typically, when you have like a supplier issue, and is that what you're talking about? A supplier issue coming in, you're saying you get a car with internal car for your organization, but it's having to do with a supplier relationship. Typically, what most organizations will do, if they've exhausted their research or their analyzation within their organization, they will forward a corrective action request, a CAR, to the supplier and let them determine it is, and then try and verify that determination. Because your only other choice would they allow you to come on site. You know, like when you get customer audits, you can also audit a supplier. And that audit may be able to wait to determine corrective root cause analysis based upon the processes that you're auditing at their location. Short of that, I mean, you're kind of cut off, because it's in the realm and the ownership of a third party that you have a relationship with, but no quality control over, except by able to issue like a corrective action towards a supplier. And if it's a customer related thing, you might ask them to determine, allow them to, you to visit them if necessary. But generally your customers are going to be, it's more of a one-way street, because it's going to be information flowing from them to you unless you have change orders involved. Now, if a change order creates a nonconformance, that could be a potential difference maker. But as a general rule, from what you're describing to me, is you move either a nonconformance, or you can start there, or you can move a complete corrective action out to the supplier. And sometimes if you can figure it out, maybe demand to do an audit of them if you're having issues, especially if they're critical. Sheldon might be able to talk about that, because when you get into the realm of API and some of your nuclear fields and your aerospace fields, that relationship you have with suppliers, and as I understand, ISO 2015 is going to be upgrading that as well. But that relationship is a whole lot larger hill to climb than it is normally to like it is today in 2015. And because you're talking about criticality of suppliers and how the background you have to do on them and the investigations, et cetera. Well, one of those tools you can use is a corrective action if you have an issue with them. And it also can lead to the requirement of an audit. And you can get answers from that as well. That's a lot larger deal to deal with, but I think you can see my point.
Yes, I agree with Michael's take on that. We want to have access to those suppliers, up to and including visits, and as Michael said, supplier corrective actions ought to be issued so that those issues can be resolved, because they are outside of your immediate organization. They are more of a second party to your organization. So following up with them to see that those products meet the requirements is necessary, because you're accountable for what you send to your customer. So once it's coming in, you want to drill down to that source to see what's happening in their organization. As a matter of fact, for API Q1, we require initial evaluations to be on site, that you actually go to the facility and see what's happening there. And this is a very key part of the process when you're determining capability of that supplier to meet your requirements. You want to sample the product. You want to see what they can actually do. Go there and see the operations. Do they have the machinery, the know-how to actually meet your requirements, up to and including protecting that product so it's properly packaged all the way through. Condensation in the product is going to lead to deterioration. So you want to drill down to make sure that the product is properly protected, its storage, and even during transportation and delivery. The verification of purchased product, when it's handed off to the customer, should at that point determine what condition they got it in. So they open that product so you can determine that. I mean, the QMS rolls out and covers most of these grounds. So once they open that package and verify what condition it's in, you should be getting a report from your customer as to what came into them. And the handoff from your facility to sign off to release it should also make sure the requirements were met.
Hey, this is Albert. I kind of go through the same thing. One thing that we have to be aware of on our side is that we have an initial supplier, but then that supplier also has subcontractors or sub-tier suppliers on their side. So it makes it a lot more difficult to get to the root cause, because a lot of times we get the root cause from our manufacturing side, but it needs to go deeper to that subcontractor, sub-tier side. And that's what we have the conflict at, because it's difficult to get down to that level, to really get down to the root cause of an issue when we have a main manufacturer, then we have this spider web of subcontractors that our manufacturer deals with that is difficult to get to and trace back to.
Yeah, those contractors and subcontractors, Albert, are held to the same standard. Mm-hmm. Your suppliers should have controls in place to ensure that whoever, wherever they're getting these products from, they are meeting the requirements. Right. So there is no point where we are able to say, well, it came from 3 levels down, so I'm not obligated. You're obligated throughout. It's like if I buy a car from Ford, the tire needs to be good. I don't care where he gets it from, where Ford buys it from. It needs to meet the requirements. They are obligated to ensure that those requirements are met. So yes, from API Q1 standpoint, that's a requirement that suppliers shall meet, shall have control of their suppliers coming in at different levels, their entire supply chain, for whatever product they are bringing into their organization.
So if I can make a comment, actually both Q1 and ISO 9001 and AS 9100, they all put the honors on the manufacturer to make sure that if they choose to subcontract some of the activities,
Yes.
they are still completely liable
Yes.
for the activities that they outsource.
Right.
So it doesn't make any less of your responsibility, or it doesn't reduce your responsibility over what you're delivering if you say, well, I bought this or I outsourced that activity.
Yes.
I think it all goes back to the contract review and the definition of the requirements between you and your customer, and also between you and your suppliers.
Good
The
point.
more definition you have over what exactly you're requiring from your suppliers and what exactly you're delivering to your customer, the easier those solutions in the future would be. Um, if your order is very vague and it doesn't completely define how you're gonna, what exactly are you gonna deliver, and on how you're gonna deliver it, and is it FOB or SOB, or is it, you know, delivered to the freight forwarder, who's responsible for the packaging and the delivery end. All these requirements need to be defined at the stage of the contract review in order to avoid those issues.
That's true, Ralph. That's where we talk about adequacy of purchasing information. Yes.
I'd like to add something real quick, share an experience more on the troubleshooting side. I had a situation where a customer was experiencing a failure with one of our products. And of course, the blame was on us because it was our product. But what it took me a while to figure out, and this is the lesson learned, is that don't forget the time variable. The way that the solution that came about was that when you're running a hydrogen service, a lot of times they'll run nitrogen first, and those operating conditions are different. We found out that the operators were actually breaking the rules and accelerating the purge process before they converted to hydrogen. What they had done is they violated the operating envelope of our product. So 6 months later, the product failed. And so my point here is consider things that are farther upstream. The damage to our product occurred during the startup. The evidence and the failure ended 6 months after that. So everybody looked at the immediate failure zone and said, oh, the problem has to be here. In fact, the problem and the damage, the fatal damage to the product actually occurred 6 months earlier. It just took that long to fail. So my point here is draw big circles. Everything is a cause until it's ruled out. Make no assumptions and cast a wide net. And don't forget that the damage could have occurred well in advance of when it actually occurred. And that's what happened in this case. So after we went through it, we measured all of our product, we evaluated our manufacturing processes and blah, blah, blah. We started casting wider circles, and sure enough, we found out that the operators had cheated on the startup because they have pressures on them to get the machinery up and running faster. They didn't understand the cause and effect of doing that, and the product failed 6 months after they actually implemented the damage. So anyway, things to think about.
Evan, this is Rebecca. I love that you brought that up because it goes absolutely to the point of when you're looking at root cause, and while we always say that it's a systematic thing, your largest contribution to variation in any system is the biological component. Right? So I love the fact that you bring that up. You checked your manufacturing process, you checked all your specs, you checked everything. Come to find out, it was the guys that were bringing the system up that just cut an edge somewhere that they really needed not to. And we miss that so much. I'm in a service industry, kind of. I work for a laboratory, and we provide laboratory results, right? But while my big thing on corrective action and this whole discussion is always we've got to fix the system. It's never about the person, it's about the system. But almost invariably, unless you have a mechanical failure, right? There's a human component to that failure that is a result of the system not being adequate, right? Where that biological component had enough influence on that particular process to cause it to fail. So I love that you brought that up, because that's really always my biggest thing. How can we foolproof the system? That's where our problems tend to occur, at least in the service industry.
Agreed. And people
I'm
don't.
gonna make a comment. I'm totally disagree with Rebecca as a lean practitioner. I don't believe in the biological component. There is something broken in your process that you cannot make a person to be responsible. I hate when people use individuals blaming the whole thing. I apologize, but that's my take.
No, agreed. I do not ever like to point the finger at a person, right? But if somebody has made a mistake that caused the system to fail, then the system has failed to prevent that mistake, right? It's not on the person ever.
Yeah. In my example, they had a process. But because the people were under pressure, they made a decision to violate that process. And so that's a procedural error on the customer side in this case. Had they not broken those rules, that would not have occurred. Anytime there's a disruption in the system, there is damage occurred. Something in the system has the product or the failed item has accumulated damage. The question is, in our case, the damage at the time that it occurred was not enough to fail the part. It took 6 months of additional damage accumulation to actually create an incident where it required the machine to be repaired. But yeah, just don't. The bottom line there is, please don't forget the time effect. Things could happen well in advance of when you actually notice them.
Sometimes too, what we find regarding the behavioral issues, I think some of that goes back to competency. It speaks to the attitudinal side of competency, because what you're having is people taking shortcuts because they might be under a time pressure, or they operate the machine outside of the parameters because of the same pressure. We can attribute this to your training process, because your training process sets up these people to behave the way they do. And if your training process is effective, then you should have personnel operating with the right attitude to ensure safety first, and in this case, it's safety of product. So it usually goes right back to a process that creates that nonconformance.
And I would offer
always
ignorance
a
as well.
process.
I would offer ignorance as well in this case, because we had intimate product knowledge about the design. The customer did not. They didn't understand those nuances, and therefore they couldn't understand the cause and effect of what they had done. They didn't make a good choice. They made an uninformed choice. They were very competent and capable. They just didn't have it, and that's a gap too, where I think manufacturers sometimes maybe don't go deep enough in explaining how things can disrupt their product. So it's always a touch and go thing. But yeah, in their case, they were very talented. We had several years of good performance with them, 5 years or more of excellent performance, and then suddenly it starts to go bad, and nobody could create that link until we found out that they were in fact cheating. But ignorance is part of it too. We owe others as much information as we can give them to properly operate the equipment we produce.
I think then that goes also into the complaint handling, right? When we talk about customers who misuse a product and the product fails on them and they come back to a manufacturer or a provider, we can own some of that responsibility in terms of educating our end customers as well, to help prevent those failures once our product is in their hands.
Good. Yes, good comment.
That should help with your customer satisfaction and repeat orders.
Hey, so hi, this is Brenda Maris from Huntsville, Alabama. And so here's the flip side. Now, I used to live in Katy, Texas, so I loved it there too. So here's the flip side to this. I've been in a situation where the operators knew the right thing to do. Well, I'll take this back. The more experienced ones did, but they brought in a number of new operators. But because production was in a hurry, they gave them minimal training. So this was the supervisor putting people who weren't completely trained on the production line. And when I found out, being the quality site manager, I went and shut production down. I was actually livid I had never worked anywhere where supervisors had actually given the instruction to go ahead and start working anyway, although you haven't had all the training. Needless to say, we had a lot of discussion after that. But it was brought to my attention by the operator that wasn't fully trained, because he told me, I don't know who else to talk to. I feel very uncomfortable being on the line when I haven't been completely trained, and I'm not even completely clear what I should be looking for. Well, that was enough. So, you know, you see all kinds of things in industry. I mean, some things are bizarre. So
That's a recipe for the disaster.
yeah, it's not always the
That's
person
what
in
we
the front
call
line
undue
either.
pressure. Yeah.
So it's just interesting, you know, that people said, well, the operator sometimes, you know, took shortcuts. But in this case, the supervisor was instructing them to take shortcuts. Go figure.
Okay. Well, thank you, guys. You know, we can keep having here a little conversation, but let's give a round of applause to Michael and Sheldon, and please turn your camera and unmute yourself that they can listen our clapping.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you very much for coming.
Hey, Tony Adams, about time you turn the clapping, sir.
And that is this is something that we want to keep doing, you know. Besides, you know, we are all quality professionals. We don't need a quality lecture about exactly the topics that we know, but it's good to have these basics, back to basics, and sharing of experiences. And I know the case that it was just shared by Brenda, I think. It's unique to you. It doesn't happen any other place.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
No, it has happened to me also, Brenda, so don't worry.
okay. So it was the first one. Hey, I've got a quick question, because this is the first time I've been attending the Houston meeting. Who do I send an email to or so in order to get the recertification unit?
Oh, if you register with your first and last name, you will receive an email, a direct email
Okay.
from us.
Then
Just-
that's perfect. Everybody does it a little differently, so I thought I'd ask. Thank you.
No, and it's a good question, because sometimes people just connect with their phone number or with a nickname. So if you are expecting RUs, please register and sign up with your first and last name and your email, and you will receive our RUs. Anyway, if you have any issue, just send us a message through my ASQ, and we will get back to you.
I'm glad I came, or I'm glad I attended. I look forward to maybe attending some other ones in the future too.
Yes, and Katie miss you. Brother.
Yeah, yeah, really.
We're not talking witness protection here, are we?
No, yeah.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. You wanna
Thank you, everybody.
Everybody got something else? We can leave the channel open, but I think it was a good conversation, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you. Good presentation, guys.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
It's a new.
Some pictures of our events. Please attend to our events.
Yes.
Bye.
Sign out.